And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt McLaughlin. Thank you to Bench Clears for giving me the opportunity to talk to some pretty cool people. But that's not why you clicked on this video, probably. My face is not what drives the people here. Today, I am honored to be joined by the inaugural Cruiserweight champion of the WWE, two-time tag team champion in Impact Wrestling. Also, probably the best hair I've ever seen. Hair does not move an inch ever. The one and only TJ Perkins. TJ, thank you for coming on the show, man.
I think the hair compliment is the best one out of all those accolades. I appreciate it. Normally I have it stuffed under a hat, but
what's today, the hair routine like? It never moves. It's always in the best shape possible. What is your secret?
Well, I guess it's a little bit more fancy than some people would think, but then in other ways it's a lot more vagabond-ish than people would think. Like I have really curly, thick hair, so when I take a shower or something, like if I want to like comb it, I have to straighten it. So I feel like such a pansy all the time, you know. Otherwise it's really curly, like, you know, sometimes it's like Bruno Mars curly. It's really bad. But once I comb it once, I won't touch it for like a week. So then it's like, so in some ways I'm kind of a fancy like pansy guy, but then in other ways I'm like, you know, it's almost like, you know, kind of rock and roll, I guess.
Do you have any bad haircuts over the years that stick out to you and you're just like, I never want to do that again?
Well, I'm a big Cristiano Ronaldo fan, so I've had a lot of bad attempts at copying his haircuts. Most of them are easy, but I think, you know, he got into a generation, like, you know, a few years where he would do cool lines in his hair, and it was very hit or miss. Sometimes they'd be great, sometimes they'd be really bad.
Yeah, definitely in my area. You walk into certain barbershops and you show them a Ronaldo photo. They're like, dude, this is not possible. We're going to have to bust out like mathematical instruments to do this stuff. It just never comes out right. Also, my shape of head, not good for the Ronaldo or soccer player look.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, you got to find stuff that would like fit the shape of your head a little bit. Sometimes I'll find like if I want to grow my hair longer, I'll find guys that like do not have the same shape head as me. But then I feel like a lot of times I'll just kind of copy like Ronaldo or Beckham or something. They have they have a normal head shape for me, I guess. But some people they look at me and they're like, I can't. This is not possible to do on you. You get out of here.
David Beckham's one of the most attractive men on the planet. I always, if I could be David Beckham level, in my hair, in my facial hair, at all, any area of my life, like David Beckham, I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't care what it is.
Oh yeah, he's probably the most handsome man on earth. Seeing David Beckham is like listening to the Beatles for the first time.
Right? You never forget it.
Life. Yeah.
So let's talk some hockey. How'd you get into hockey? Did you ever have any memories as a kid? Did it happen later in life when you found the sport? What was your journey to seeing the hockey and how you became a fan in the first place?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was originally born in Kansas City, and but my family moved to Los Angeles when I was like 3 years old, and so it was about 1987, 88. And the first sports I remember growing up watching, the first teams I was ever attached to were the Lakers and the Kings. And I'm a big LA guy, so you know, Lakers, Dodgers, Rams, Kings. Those are my teams, and but Kings hockey and Lakers basketball was on all the time in my house. So I remember watching Kings games with my dad, and so you know, that generation, we're talking about, you know, Robitaille, Gretzky, obviously, you know, his arrival was huge. This is like the era that I grew up watching him, you know, the Chevron logo. And you know, Yari Curry, McSorley, Rob Blake, Kelly Rudy, Thomas Sandstrom, Jimmy Carson. All these guys these are the names that I grew up learning from when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old. And you know, I was heartbroken when they lost in the Stanley Cup to Montreal. Ever since then, I've vowed to hopefully never see another Canadian champion in my lifetime, because that shattered me so bad when I was a little kid. But and then, you know, shortly after that, like a year or so later, you know, we got the Mighty Ducks. And I feel like everybody my age, I'm 37, everybody my age, probably, there's not a lot of people that hate the Mighty Ducks if you're like my age, because when they arrived, it was like such a pop culture thing, and it just seemed like such a fun thing. And especially if you're in Southern California, you were probably at least a little bit of a Ducks fan. And you know, I liked the Ducks as well, especially like the '90s generation. You know, Paul Correa, Teemu Solani, you know, Guy Bear, like all these guys. But I was always a Kings guy. I've always been a diehard Kings fan. Kings will always be my team.
Yeah, and I think it's weird for me because like I'm obviously a much younger generation of hockey fan, to think that like the NHL brought a team into expansion and just named it after a movie. It is so crazy and out there that it's almost like quintessential 1990s, in my opinion.
You know, it seemed like a lot of people really loved the rebrand in the 2000s, but I hated it, man. I loved, and it wasn't, you know, they're not really my team. They're just a team that I grew up watching. But to me, I was like, man, why? Like Wild Wing is such a great imagery, and the goalie mask is such an iconic logo and all that, and the colors were so unique. And that's one thing that I've always really loved about hockey and the NHL specifically, is that like the 90s went through such a great boom of like uniforms in sports, basketball, hockey, football, everything was like iconic looking back. And I used to think that it was just people my age thought that, but I feel like even young kids are like, man, those old jerseys look so cool, like the Miami Dolphins and all this stuff. And like Anaheim was one of those like timeless looking uniforms and color sets. And like, man, you change it to, you know, not that black, orange, and gold is bad, but like it's unique. But man, like that was like, and I'm glad that they started kind of reaching back to the old branding now. And you know, NHL, that's another thing that I loved about the NHL, is that like as time has gone on and uniforms in other sports have been modernized, and the line work and stuff changes, and you don't see a lot of classic teams holding on to their stuff anymore. You know, you don't see a lot of Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox that are like, I'm never changing anything. But the NHL, like even with the changes, everything has felt so timeless. Like a lot of stuff remains. And I love that. I've always loved that about the NHL.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like for me, I think the 90s is, I agree with you, one of the best periods of sports uniforms on probably in the history of all four sports. In NBA, you got the Supersonics, you had the Rockets with that weird, they had the weird like early Hakeem like red and gold years with the red and golds, the Clutch City years. And in Major League Baseball, you have some teams that are like kind of experimenting with some like weird color combinations. And then in the NHL, you got the Dodgers rocking purple and gold, or not the Dodgers, the Kings rocking purple and gold. And you have the Flyers that still have like a classic black and orange, but also like the Maple Leafs were experimenting with some different looks. So it's just this weird like time of fuck it, let's try something different, but also it like doesn't burn because the internet wasn't around to just troll the absolute tar out of them.
Yeah, no, I think, it was great. It was a great time where like the information age was not developed enough to stop like creative gambles. You know what I'm saying? Like, so a lot of stuff that teams probably would never gamble on today, they just let it ride back then. So you saw a lot of like jackpots because they wouldn't gamble on stuff today. I don't think as much. They think it's too monetarily. They probably think it's too big of an investment to risk. But at the time, they're like, well, we don't know if this is going to work or not. So they let everything ride. And so there's stuff that you probably will never see that a lot of that stuff done again, because everybody will be like, no, let's just be red and black. That's safe.
Yeah, exactly. Like the 49ers, when they had those Joe Young with the like the kind of the drop shadow numbers, or the Steve Young drop shadow numbers.
Yeah.
Like they had those. the Cowboys had those giant star logos on the shoulder pads.
Yeah, and the color blocking where they changed the sleeves a little bit, which was I think a retro thing that they had brought back. But like, yeah, exactly like that. You don't see that as much anymore.
That's what I want the Patriots to do. Bring back like the old Curtis Martin with the giant Pat logos on the shoulder pads,
Oh
like
yeah.
the starter jerseys. Bring those back, please. And now it just bothers me that these teams like add like a stripe on the shoulder and they're like new threads for the new season. It's
Oh,
like
I know. And it's so like, and I'm a fan of minimalist stuff, but like some of the line work is so small and like non-existent now. Like I don't know if it was the Colts or somebody, but like the shoulder line work, I'm like, man, that doesn't even look like there's anything there. Like,
exactly.
why would you even do that? Just make it big, man.
Or just save the announcement. Don't even tell us. Just say like, oh yeah,
Just
we
do
tried.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So as you're growing up in hockey, when does the love for wrestling start to come up? Did that start before you started getting interested in all the other sports, or did that happen after?
No, it was about the same time. I mean, my earliest memories of like entertainment consumption was WWF Saturday night's main event, Lakers basketball and Kings hockey. That's like the earliest I remember anything.
It's a really good cycle of entertainment. Just saying,
Yeah,
it's a really
yeah.
good.
And then shortly after that, or kind of alongside that, Dodgers baseball. But like that's like the most frequent stuff. Like my earliest memories of seeing anything on TV are those things. Like from when I was like 2, 3, 4 years old, just the earliest things I could remember seeing was those things. So, I always had a love for wrestling. And then, my dad was a big sports guy, and being from the Midwest, you just kind of grew up like being an athlete, and I played all sports and stuff like that. I actually didn't play hockey until I was, I think 18, 19 years old. Like I was finishing high school. I was already wrestling. I started pro wrestling when I was 13. So I was already well into like my career and like knew I wasn't going to college and all that. And I just started playing hockey recreationally because I'm like, I have the free time now. I grew up, in Southern California. It's not in a lot of schools and stuff like that. So I had like the freedom to like pursue it. And hockey is also kind of an expensive sport, so like, I was able to do that on my own. And then for like the longest time, it's like if I wasn't wrestling, you always would see me at the rink. Like people, like I was always skating somewhere. And I actually haven't played in a few years. The pandemic and a lot of stuff, like, obviously played a role in that, and like my work schedule and everything. But yeah, I mean, I always grew up with sports intertwined into, I mean, I guess wrestling falls under that category, but like, I always felt like they were intertwined for me. Even when I would play other sports, I would kind of, I don't know what it was, even before I was a wrestler, like I sort of perceived them the same way, like in a sense. Like I think that's kind of what helped me with wrestling, is I always felt very natural in the setting. And so perhaps, I don't know, playing sports, being an athlete, it's like you feel like you've been there before. So, it doesn't really feel like foreign territory.
Yeah, and I think wrestling is it's one of those like forms of entertainment that for like a 13 to 15-year-old kid is like perfect. Like I remember watching Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he's given the 316 promo. And he's Austin 316 says, I just whipped your ass. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I'd never seen anything like that in a sport. And for me, that was the moment where I was like, oh, I am all in on this. And then you find D-Generation X. I got 2 words for you. Suck it. And it's like, you just see these characters and it's crazy. What was there a specific like wrestler that you looked up to and tried to really kind of model your game similar to how athletes kind of use other athletes that they admire to like kind of take some things away from?
Yeah. Actually I put them on my arm here. Tiger Mask is probably my favorite wrestler ever of all time.
Oh, that's a dope tattoo.
He started New Japan in the early 80s. And a lot of what people know of like cruiserweights and junior heavyweights also was sort of invented by him a lot. Like he kind of put that on the forefront of like mainstream. Eddie Guerrero, that's all the fire here, and then Shawn Michaels, the little heart.
That's awesome.
So those are guys I looked up to probably the most in terms of frequency, but especially as I got older, and I mean, I guess it's like, Kobe Bryant breaks into the league, and obviously he heavily looks up to Jordan. And then you find out later he finds the value in Olajuwon. So he learns how to get footwork from Olajuwon. He learns how to, get his shot from other guys, or picks up different stuff. He gets a lot of IQ from, Bill Russell and stuff like that. And for me, it was kind of the same way. I started drifting, and like, you get into Bret Hart, you get into different guys from the UK or from Mexico and stuff like that. And that's kind of how it went for me. But these three guys are like that. Those are my guys. Is what I look up to the most.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I think I know for me growing up and first getting into wrestling, like the cruiserweight that I knew of obviously was Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, some of those guys. Do you think there's a misconception about certain cruiserweights where it's like, I'm just want to get your opinion on this, where it's all people kind of misperceive it as all high flying kind of stunt action type moves, where there's much more to it as an art? Like, do you think that there's a sort of a disconnect there between the fans and how the art is actually performed?
A little bit. And I think that perception changes it when you take into account like international stuff, because like, for example, in Japan, their junior heavyweights, which is what we would call cruiserweights here, junior heavyweights there, some of them, they're faster. They use a lot of aerial moves and things like that. But a lot of them wrestle the same as the heavyweights do. It's a lot of power bombs and slams and stuff like that. It's just it looks and feels different coming from a smaller weight class. And same thing in Mexico, and it's almost the opposite. Like, there's like high flyers and different things that are smaller, like welterweights or whatever, but the heavyweights do that too over there. So it's not really a stylistic barrier as far as weight class in other countries. Whereas here in America, I think at a certain point it was sort of just a television programming thing. And from a storytelling standpoint, it was like, this is how we're going to tell the difference. Small guys do it like this, big guys do it like this. And it's not that it doesn't make sense. I mean, obviously, like, being faster, staying in the air is more conducive to a smaller guy, sure. But I think that was more so administrations in America treating American fans like they're stupid and they can't digest it any other way other than to say small guy fly, big guy strong. Like, I feel like now we've reached a point where the diversity is sort of breaking the walls down, so to speak. And I was happy to be part of the cruiserweight generation in WWE that kind of restarted in these late 2010s, because now is finally a time where like, I'm not a particularly aerial guy. I can be, I guess, but I pride myself on technical wrestling and different stuff that is more based in traditional wrestling. So, me and a lot of other guys are like that. And I felt like now American fans are starting to get a more diverse look at, like, well, cruiserweights don't all just do this, but I think for a while that was sort of the not colloquialism, but it's just the way of the culture, I guess.
Yeah, and I think part of now how the fans can see the whole way that other wrestlers in other countries wrestle is the access to be able to watch highlights and other matches at the whatever with your phone on YouTube. And it's not just WWE, AEW, and whatever WCW highlights you can find. You can go to New Japan. You can go to all these other Ring of Honor. You can find all these other different matches. And now that's kind of like expanded our perspectives as fans. I know for me personally, but what was that like in the late 2010s being brought into that sort of cruiserweight revival? Like, I was always interested in that. Like, what was that whole experience like for you?
excuse me, I have a bad allergy cough.
No worries.
It's so hot, or not hot, it was like cold and humid in Japan, where spent the last 2 months, and then hot and humid, and then I just got back to the West Coast here and it's very dry. So it kills me
Your
on
body's getting
allergies.
put through a lot. Your body's just like begging for mercy.
um to answer your question though, for me it was unique because I started I started in 1998. So I started at a time where generationally it was very different. And in a more specific aspect, generationally, I started at a time when the original cruiserweight division was hot. So if I had been a little bit bigger and a little bit older, I was just a young teenager, but if I'd been a little bit bigger and a little bit older at the time, I could have been in the original cruiserweight division. So for me, like 20 years later almost, to be in this revival of it, it was unique because a lot of the guys that were part of that revival with me were guys that were so much younger. And this is, for a lot of them, this was their first wrestling job. This was like them getting drafted into the league, so to speak. Whereas for me, it's almost like me signing another veteran contract. So hey, I've been around, since, other generations. So it was kind of cool to see, like, more than anything else, like I had said before, it was really cool to see stuff that was now being connected to from a content standpoint by fans, like accepting that there's so many diverse ways to present a cruiserweight, as opposed to before and all the way in between, where you had to be one way if you were a cruiserweight. And in the beginning, like when I was first starting, guys like Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, like these guys didn't always wrestle like cruiserweights. They were doing power bombs and brainbusters and suplexes and all kinds of throws and stuff like that. And they wrestled very hard and hit hard and things like that. And that's not necessarily what cruiserweights are known for, but they sort of broke that mold. Dean Malenko was a technical wrestler. He never touched the ropes. So like it was kind of cool to sort of, I guess, play their role in the new generation. Whereas, there are high flyers and there are guys that are like the new Mysterios, but it was like I was sort of like a new Malenko, so to speak.
Yeah, and is it intimidating to get to WWE? I know you said it's kind of like signing a veteran contract, but that's like the big leagues. That's the highest, at least, audience, or the largest audience that you can possibly reach on the wrestling stage, at least right now. Is it intimidating at least a little bit to say, like, this is what I grew up watching and now I'm here?
I don't know for everybody else. For me, no. And I would say that it's like years of service kind of hardens me for that. But when I was graduating high school, New Japan kind of scouted me into their dojo system. And, at 18 years old, I was doing like the Tokyo Dome and going on tour with them and getting on these first class flights to Tokyo and making more money than I thought I would ever make in my life, let alone at 17, 18 years old. And it was kind of like being Kobe Bryant and going straight from high school to the Lakers, like, because I always wanted to go to New Japan. That was the team the team I wanted to always play for. So to like go from like high school to that, and I had been wrestling for like 4 years or so, regionally and doing independence and stuff like that. But to kind of go to that big of a stage at a young age, ever since then, it was like nothing could really be a culture shock to me at that point. But even then, like I a lot of the New Japan officials were always taken aback. But like I remember sitting in the Tokyo Dome locker room and the president and some of the other people in the company would like kind of ask me, like, you don't look nervous or anything. And it just, to me, I was like, I don't get that. I've never really had that, like, playing sports when I was younger. Like if I didn't feel anything taking the last shot in a basketball game or going to the free throw line with 5 seconds left. Like I didn't, it felt like I could be in an empty gym and I'd feel the same way shooting those shots. Like I was just born that way. I don't know. Like I don't get anxiety in that way. But definitely after, 20 years, like you do kind of think, wow, like WWE, this is like the Yankees now, like, this is the team, this is the Lakers, this is, Real Madrid, this is the place. Um, but it felt just like any other place, it was just another uniform to put on, and I was proud to do it and happy to do it. But for me, it wasn't really like that. But it's never really been like that for me anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see how the differences and how like wrestling is sort of consumed in the States compared to internationally. And for me, like I remember the Cruiserweight Classic was like announced, and I was like, "Oh shit, I forgot Cruiserweights were a thing." Like I was very just ignorant of that, and I'll be very blunt
Well,
about that.
it had been a while, it had been, I don't know what was like 2006 or something was really like kind of the last big cruiserweight boom for a little while.
Yeah, because then Mysterio pretty much just bursts onto the main event scene, and Eddie
Yeah,
Guerrero's there, and so they're like, "Why would we have a cruiserweight division specifically when these guys are pretty
yeah,
much just in the main event anyway?"
yeah. So you're talking a whole generation that it was gone. So I don't blame people for sort of like, and I think that's why WWE was adamant about pushing the concept of inaugural, like, because I like it was so funny. Like people, like I would get so many comments or people that were like, you're not the first, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm well aware. It's just that like a lot of people didn't know we existed, 10 years ago, because some of you fans are like 15 years old. 10 years ago, you were watching My Little Pony. You weren't watching wrestling. You don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good. Dude, there were some guys in the Cruiserweight Classic that were like 21 years old. 10 years ago, they were 11. Like they weren't even watching wrestling. I remember telling Noam Dar, I was like, you didn't even watch Eddie when he was alive. Like, like
That's crazy. It's
you
crazy.
started watching like your favorite WrestleMania match was like the Big Show and somebody. Like I don't like I'm like you barely watch wrestling. You don't know what it's like to see Shawn Michaels in tights. Like
Yeah, yeah.
Arya Davari told me one time, he said he goes he told me when he was a kid, he didn't understand why all the wrestlers had such respect for the GM Shawn Michaels. And I was like, because you didn't watch him as a wrestler. You started watching after he retired, like during his break. Like so I think the age gap, the company identified that, and they were like, we need to set aside a separate generation. And this is the inaugural going forward, but a
Mhm.
lot of there was like a mix of older fans that are like, you're not the first. So yeah, we fucking know that. Like tell that to people that are 20 and less, under, like they don't know. They've never seen it.
Yeah, exactly. And for you kind of being sort of one of the OGs to at least lead that Cruiserweight Classic, was there an OG when you were coming up that really helped you out and really kind of pulled you aside and showed you how sort of not necessarily the business side, could be business or wrestling, but was there an OG that really helped you out in your career that really left an impact on you?
There's a few. I actually had trouble having a lot of mentors when I was younger, and I don't know if it was like being so young, because I was abnormally young when I started, and I did abnormally well, like at an early age, and so I think that turned off a lot of my peers. So a lot of people that could have been big brothers to me were like, "No, fuck this guy," And I don't know if it's like they felt threatened or jealous. I don't like to assume that, because I don't think that I'm anything to be threatened by. Like I don't think I'm great or anything, but like I do think that may have played a role in why some of the people that were my contemporaries at the time, but just older, like didn't like sort of, hey, come along with me like they would with some other people. It was more like, no, let's cut this guy out instead. And then a lot of older wrestlers just simply couldn't relate to me, because I'm 13 years old jumping in the back of cars to make these shows, driving out of town. Like I would ditch school, spend 3 days not going to school so I can go, drive from LA to San Francisco to Phoenix to Vegas or San Diego to Tijuana, wherever I needed to get to these indie shows. And I'm riding in the car with guys that are 30, 32, 35 years old. They got a wife, they got kids, they got, alcoholism, they got, a mortgage. And I can't even drive. I never been to a school dance. Like, I can't relate to them. So a lot of them didn't necessarily mentor me either, just because it was like, there was a solid disconnect lifestyle wise. So I would just kind of glean whatever I could, about the game itself. But a lot of people didn't take me under their wing. But there were a few, and Scott Norton was one. And when I got to New Japan, it was still his generation. Like, he came up in New Japan when it was like the Eddie, Malenko, Benoit generation, and Scott was still there. When WCW kind of folded or whatever, he stayed working with New Japan. The other guys went to WWE. And so Scott was there, and he, God, he taught me how to tie my boots. He taught me perspective on the business, on life, on a lot of stuff. And so he was great. He's kind of like my wrestling dad. And the Guerrero family was pretty big for me too, because a lot of them would pass through Southern California. And ironically, the only one I never met was Eddie out of all of them. Hector, Mondo, Chavo, Junior and Senior, all of them I've spent time in the ring with. I've wrestled them, I've trained with them, I've sat with them and picked their brain. They've been so wonderful for me. Vicky, his wife, like everybody, but Eddie was the only one I never met. We just happened to never cross paths. When he was fired, he went back to New Japan, and when he got rehired, he left New Japan, and I started on the next tour, and then I didn't get to WWE until he had already passed. So it's like I just missed him, like everywhere. It's just like I went to Ring of Honor right when he had stopped doing a few indies, and he was not there.
Yeah.
Like it's like I was chasing the ghost of Eddie Guerrero for so many years. But so there's been a few like that have really helped me out.
Yeah, and I think Eddie Guerrero had such a personality that just kind of fed through the screen. Like, as a fan, if you watch his matches, you can feel it, and it's incredible. What do you think makes sort of an engaging wrestler? Like, what do you think is your version of trying to figure out how can I keep people as engaged as possible and get them to either rally with me or rally against me? Like, are there certain aspects of a wrestler that really need to be kind of honed down and hammered down before they can really take off, I guess?
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time. I had to adjust my headphones had on me.
Yeah, no worries. I'm talking a lot, so I'm taking up a lot of battery in the AirPods.
No, it's all good. I need to replace my AirPods, man. They die in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is there a certain component of a wrestler's, I guess, repertoire or character or personality that leaves such a lasting impact, such as an Eddie or Shawn Michaels or a Bret Hart, like some of those guys that really leaves an impact on the fans, in your opinion?
There's always such like I feel like it's over romanticized a bit, the idea of like the it factor, and you hear it a lot. And the older I get, I kind of sort of dissect that in two ways. One, I definitely believe that sort of thing exists. Some people just simply light up a room. And the first time I really truly believed that was when I was in Impact, and I was wrestling as Suicide, actually. And there was one day, this was when they were running bigger arenas like AEW. They were trying to really kind of go big at the time, so it was, an arena show in St. Louis maybe, and I had to wrestle Jeff Hardy. And they're like, we're scheduling with Jeff singles match today. We thought it'd be really cool and kind of special for me. I always looked up to Jeff. I was a big Jeff fan and all that. And I remember sitting in the ring, and this was, not to go into all the story, because most of it really only benefits like wrestlers if I tell the whole story, but the part that fits right here, I remember sitting in the ring because I entered first. And when Jeff's music hit and he came through the curtain, the place just lit up. And if you know Jeff, he's not particularly charismatic. You could probably see that from the outside. Like you can tell that he's kind of shy, not really a talker. But if you know him in real life, that's proven true tenfold. I mean, he is kind of like a rock star. He's almost like the Johnny Depp of wrestling. Like, he keeps to himself. He's very kind, and there's not a mean or malicious bone in his body. And he's very shy and kind of introverted. You wouldn't think like, oh, there's an it factor here. This guy lights up the room, but he does. He comes out and fuck, man. I mean, I remember thinking, God, this is gonna be the easiest night of my life, because it's you just could feel it. Like, and I remember thinking, I do not have that. There's guys that just do not have that, and there's some people that do. But the other way I dissect it, and I kind of learned this with age, is that the world is so big and it's very subjective. And you come to learn that, like, take somebody like The Rock, for example. Like, you look at The Rock and it's like, clearly this guy has an it factor. Clearly this guy has charisma. Clearly, like, whatever box we need to check off regarding this category, he checks it off with a bold, like, vibrant Sharpie, permanent as fuck.
Yeah.
But you do come across people, and not just a few people, a lot of people that they just don't get him, and they don't really care for The Rock. And it's like, how is that if he has the it factor, he's charismatic and all that? And so it started to kind of strike me that these things are subjective, and these intangibles it's not an exact science. So for some, it's like, one person's trash is another person's treasure, so to speak. So, like, there's a lot of people that, like, they might be completely enamored with Dean Malenko, and there's nothing, and it's not even so much what he can do in the ring. They just think that his presence or how he holds himself, his demeanor, is the best thing in the world. Like, for whatever reason, they love that. Same thing with Bret Hart, and to others, they're like, well, I don't get that. I don't think that that's cool at all, but that's you. And we're talking about somebody else. Whereas on the other side, like, you might think Hulk Hogan's cool or whatever. And it's like, the older I get, the more I see that like, everybody kind of has a little bit of an it factor. It's just about finding your audience. You can't just assume that your tools are going to fit universally for everybody, and in that regard, that sort of, to me, is what I don't really think that you can rate a performer or grade a performer, because it's really more pass or fail. You either can do this job or you can't. And I think there's too many subjective elements to it to be able to say, well, like, I rate this guy like this or like this or like this, because it's like, what works for you may not work for another fan. They just don't get it. They don't see it. I like Spider-Man. This guy likes Batman. I like Superman. This guy likes Thor, that sort of thing. But what I think is telling as a performer, when I see other performers, if you're able to still find a way to draw in people that you are not their cup of tea, then you're finding a way to, you're building a house with tools that aren't meant to build a house. You're finding a way to build it anyway. That is a big deal. And I don't know that that's more or less valuable than somebody who just has a broad it factor. Like, Rock has a broad it factor. A lot of people just are drawn in. His tools are going to work on a lot of people. So, is that more valuable than the guy that can make anything work? I don't know. But that's what I've come to see, is that, like, it's sort of subjective. And the best thing a performer can do is say, you know what? I know exactly the type of people that I have the it factor for, and I should reach out to those people as much as possible. And for the ones that don't get me, then, try to go the other way. They may not love me, but maybe I can make them hate me because they don't get me. Now you can use it in multiple ways. I think that's where a performer finds their value the most.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, because with Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok and all this stuff, people get, myself included, get rattled by the negative comments. And instead of focusing, or the negative likes or whatever, instead of focusing on the people that did like it and did leave the good comments, you instead try and focus on converting everyone that's against you and do that. So I think that's really interesting how, like, you kind of put that into a positive, where you're just evoking a reaction no matter what.
Right. Or just, like, using it. Like, you don't have to convert them, but, like, I think you also have to have perspective. A lot of people, they tend to sort of, they play themselves in a way, and they trick themselves because they differentiate between the irrational love and the irrational hate. Like, and it's easy, you know, like you hear nice things or you get compliments or whatever it is, you know, even if you're not a public persona, you post your pictures of your vacation and like, oh, you look like you're in such good shape or whatever. It's easy to take these types of comments and things and compliments and think, oh, that's great, these must be true.
Yeah.
You want them to be true, but like, you know, but then when you hear negative criticism and it's like, well, this sucks, it's probably not true. Like, you want it to not be true, but reality is both of them are sort of irrational. It doesn't really matter. So it's almost like, you know, don't take the irrational love too seriously. Just identify that it's there. What can you use it for? Like, you can entertain these people. You're worth something to them for that reason. But then look on the other side of the fence and the irrational hate. Like, do you disregard that? You don't have to. Just identify that you're worth something to them too, just in a different way. And there's ways you can entertain them for that reason. This is why I always tell people, like, I don't mind being a punching bag for people. You know, if that's what entertains you in your life, to cut my legs out from under me because you just look at me and you're like, I fucking hate this guy. I don't know why I hate this guy. Great, because like I'll make money off of that, but at the same time you're getting your money's worth. Like you're fulfilling something in your life that you're being entertained by. So great, I'll be your villain. That's fine. I'll be your Joker. To other people, maybe I'm Batman. I don't know, but that's fine. You know, I think a performer needs anybody. I think in life that's good perspective to have, just in general, just like, you know, to know that like, well, either side of the fence is equal parts almost irrelevant, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, to kind of tie it back into like what we mentioned with Kobe looked at the bad performances and just kind of picked the seeds and the areas of improvement instead of getting too locked in on the fact that it was a bad game or something like that. Right, and on the other side, you could do, okay, I had a great game, but maybe I wasn't getting my teammates involved more, or maybe I wasn't executing on this play or something like that.
Yes,
and so
he doesn't get, he's not too wrapped up in the victory. Like what can he use it for? And he's also not wrapped up in the loss. What could he use it for? And there's perspective there, you know, like just let it go. It's just one, you know, move on to the next one. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got. I got it twice, actually. I got it from Roddy Piper one time. And I also got it from Scott Norton. I remember asking, as young wrestlers do, I'm sure young anybody does this, you know, whatever if you're an artist, a doctor, if you're an athlete, you know, you like, I'm sure a rookie goes up to a 10-year vet or whatever in a locker room. But I asked them, as young wrestlers do, like, did you see my match? What can I do better? You know, teach me something or whatever. The best piece of advice I ever got, these guys both told me this separately on different occasions. So I stopped asking for this reason. As they both were like, well, you're good at this. You've been doing it. If you made a mistake out there, you knew it the moment you made it. You don't need to ask us. You know, you're asking us just to hear it again. You know, you're smart enough to know if there's something that needs to be corrected. And so more importantly, like, is the match over? Yes, it is. Can you go back and do it again? No, I can't. Do you have another one tomorrow? Yes, I do. Do you plan on doing this more than a day? Yes, I do. Then move on to the next one, because that one's gone now. You can't get it back. So after that, I stopped asking, you know, did you see my match? What can I do better? Because like, you need to learn to be self-sufficient, but you also need to have perspective. You can't go back and get those anymore. Move on to the next one. You got 1,000 more to do. Live your life, you know?
No, I think that's really good advice. And I think a lot of people should listen to that, hopefully. Should the Lakers trade for Kyrie Irving?
I don't know. I feel like it's almost like a 1-for-1 thing. I mean, I know there's obviously like these extracurricular sticking points, but if we're really talking about what the crux of the conversation is here, one team is trading a point guard for another point guard. They're both the same age. You know, if you irrationally hate one, you probably irrationally hate the other guy for similar reasons. If you irrationally love one, you probably love the other guy for the same reasons. And at the end of the day, if one is on the team and LeBron and AD are healthy for more than 65 games, they probably go to the playoffs. And then who cares? You didn't need the trade. If the other guy is on the team and Bron and AD are healthy, they probably go to the playoffs, and who cares? You're glad you did the trade. So it's almost, and both of them come off the books at the end of the summer anyway, or next summer anyway, because Kyrie has to extend and Russ is in a contract year. So they're both in a contract year. So it's like, it's almost like, you know, like which one do you prefer? Like, do you want strawberry ice cream or vanilla ice cream? What's the difference, you know? I'm a fan of both. I've always been a big Russ guy. I feel like they should just, I feel like by default they should hang on to Russ just because he's already been there a year, and statistically speaking, to have a third new roster in 3 straight years, like historically, that's never led to success.
Yeah,
you know. So at least there's some foundation and chemistry there that they can build upon. They could correct mistakes. And like I said, if the 2 guys that they're paying $75 million for only play half the season, you can't expect to win that way. You could trade for Michael Jordan, you're not going to win. Like that's that half the cap is tied up in those 2 guys, and they don't play half the season. That's a problem. And I think I've kind of said that most of the year, was that like, people are overlooking the simple answers. Like if the Lakers have to build a team that can win without LeBron and AD, then LeBron and AD are a problem. You need to trade them. If they build a team that can't win without LeBron and AD, then LeBron and AD are still the problem. You need to trade them. Like, they have to be healthy in either scenario. So it's kind of like, sure, trade for Kyrie. I love Kyrie, but like, trade for him. You guys are going to think he's the problem too, but it's not. Like, these guys got to be healthy. You can't, I mean, look at the Clippers, like, and the Nets. Both of them had the same availability issues. They're both top heavy with 2 or 3 top guys and whatever guys underneath. Both of them finished 7, 8 seed. Clippers didn't make the playoffs either. Like, it's not rocket science, you know, like, the guys got to play.
Yeah, it's just that no man's land of like, you're in that like 8, 9, 10 seed spot of like, yeah, we make the playoffs, but we either don't get a high draft pick or we don't make a deep playoff run.
Well, it's just a big, you know, it's to be top heavy like that is a big gamble. Like, if the health isn't there and they're not available, you're paying $75 million for 0, 0, 0 in production most nights. When they're in street clothes, they're producing 0.
Yeah.
When they are playing, I think LeBron and AD combined for 53 points, 18 rebounds, and 11 assists. So when they don't play, you look at Russ, or if it's Kyrie, and it's like, okay, guys, we know you're already scoring 20 points and 8 assists and 8 rebounds, or whatever they do individually. Russ is more broadly divided. Kyrie's a scoring machine, whatever. But you're looking at them and saying, hey, on top of your own averages, can you also replace 53 points because these guys are sitting out? Like, that's not realistic. You can't blame these guys for not being able to do that. That's not fair to them. But the 2 guys that are sitting out cost $75 million. So you also don't have enough money to pay for backups that could do it either. So I don't know. I just feel like the trade is sort of irrelevant. Selfishly, I would love to see Kyrie as a Laker. You know, they're both Kobe guys. Russ was a big Kobe guy too. But I don't know. I guess it's sort of like, you know, like, you're trading 1 for 1. It's not going to make a difference. You know, I just want to see.
Skip Bayless will give Russ more motivation. We know that for so.
Yes. You want to see the 2 primaries play more. That's really the issue.
Yeah. What do you think the Kings have to do now in the offseason? They made that trade for Fiala. So they're not necessarily in a bad spot. It's just kind of weird, similar to the Lakers.
Well, it's odd because I feel like they didn't expect to have made this much progress this last season.
Oh, no way. Yeah, they thought this was going to be 2 years down the line. Or something
I thought that I was looking at another year of, 12th place or something. Like, they're not going to make the playoffs. So when they made the playoffs, or like, when they did as well as they did, like, I was just like, I could not believe that. And for a good part of the year, they're like getting towards the top of the standings. I was like, this is unreal. I think really the thing with them is that they need to prepare to not have a franchise player soon, So it's like there's moves that they make that, like, they're building a team, but feel like most teams rebuild and they need to figure out how to build the outer portions, the support part. They know what the foundation is. And I feel like the Kings are the opposite. Like they're in a position where they're not going to have Kobe and Dowdy forever.
Yeah.
If not, very soon. Like, so it's kind of like and it's almost fun to think, because it's like, in a sense, it's like, oh, they get to really try to swing for a home run. You might get a new hero come to town, maybe I think their next step is figuring out how to make some magic and finally pull like an Eichel McDavid type of guy, because they're going to need somebody that's going to be their foundation now.
Yeah, and I think the first wave of that is Dustin Brown retiring after the season. Jonathan Quick isn't getting much younger. Dowdy's coming off that injury that ended his season. And, I think this is kind of like an exciting time to be a Kings fan, I would feel like, because you get to at least throw some younger players into the mix and see what the veterans have left. And so it's like it's a completely new like type of team that if they do contend, it's like, oh my God, it's separate from those Stanley Cup winning teams.
Yeah, I think that winning was kind of a bonus. Like having a good season was a bonus, but like I think it's fun because of the uncertainty. Like you're getting these guys like Arvidssons and guys and then having guys come up like Byfield, and it's like, wow, this is exciting, but it's like you could feel it that they need a star and they're going to have to go out and get one. And it's like, it's exciting because it's like, who's going to be our guy,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I look forward to is how they start to begin that hunt, which they kind of have to do now. I think, Dowdy's availability, this is the first time it's ever really been like questionable, and then you start to come to the realization that like, man, it's been a while, he's not Dowdy from like the cups, anymore. I mean, he probably is when he plays, but it's like, that he's not going to do that for much longer.
And he's not interested in a rebuild. It sounds like he is not interested in just tanking and just acquiring picks.
Yes. And then saying, and with Kobe the same way. So it's kind of like, eventually they're going to have to try to swing big on some fresh blood. And it's exciting. It reminds me of when we got Gretzky when I was a little kid. It's like they have to eventually grab somebody who's going to be the foundation. And I don't think that they're going to be in a position to draft that guy. Like they're not bad enough to pick that high, and they're on an upswing as far as building the team. So it's almost like it's going to have to be a free agent or a trade or something like that, or like a disgruntled star who wants out, something like that, and then it's like, in come the Kings. Like that'll be what happens, I think. So I'm excited to see who it'll be.
Well, I don't think it'll be hard to convince a player to, hey, come on down to Los Angeles. I don't think many.
Well, especially with like multiple cup wins in the last generation and like a winning culture, and the fan base is strong. Like they pack Staples Center a lot. For the last 10 years or so. So the stigma of California hockey is not there anymore. At least with LA. Maybe a little bit with Anaheim, but with LA, you feel like these are diehard hockey fans, like old schoolish hockey fans. So I feel like now it feels like a destination. Yeah, there's a couple Stanley Cups in the trophy room. It's a glamour franchise. They're traditionally very loyal to their players. You look at Dustin Brown and all these guys, like, man, they really treat them good. They keep them around. So I'm excited to see what kind of star will bite on that.
Well, TJ, thank you so much for taking the time. Anywhere that people can follow you on social media, feel free to plug right here. Any projects that you got coming up or anything like that?
Well, I am pretty simple. I don't have a whole lot of socials, but Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at Mega TJP, like Mega Man. I stream on Twitch, but I haven't since I was in Japan for a couple months, but same thing on Twitch. It's Mega TJP. And wrestling wise, you can find me for the most part at New Japan Pro Wrestling. So there's New Japan World, is their streaming service. And they're also available like on Roku, YouTube, in different formats where you can find them. And I am currently one half of the junior tag team champions.
Whoa!
So I'm trying to lead a revolution for cruiserweight tag team wrestling in Japan, trying to make this hot again. So please watch my team do our thing. And thank you very much for watching this interview. If you're watching, obviously you
first
did.
title belt on the channel. That's a big one. That's a big one, TJ.
But yeah, more than anything, thank you anybody who's watching for watching. I always say without you guys, there is no me. You're the reason why I do this. So thank you.
And be sure to check out Bench Clears, benchclears.com. TJ's rocking the Kings one right on screen. Unfortunately, I forgot, of course, to wear a tank top. Of course, I feel terrible. I'm a bad host. But check out their tank tops, shorts, joggers, whatever you want to find there. TJ, thanks again, man. Really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. And as always, everyone, like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things to help us out and cheat the algorithm a little bit.